Here on the Dornan channel, I want to be able to provide people resources that they can use so that they can live their best life, whether it's spiritually, materialistically, or whatever. Because the reason I say materialistically, that includes financially, by the way. To deny that spirituality and materialism is connected is just blatantly incorrect, because the spiritual world manifests into the physical. So there is a connection there, and it's a lot easier to do what you want, what your spirit is desiring, when you have the means to be able to buy your freedom. I know that, you know, money corrupts and everything like that. The history of the Federal Reserve and what kind of a financial situation we're in currently at the moment, which is what I want to make this video about. Because I came across this guy's video named, the guy who posted it, his name is Guy Crittenden. He's from Toronto, around where I'm from originally. And this guy does a far better job at articulating what's currently going on inside of the global situation in terms of markets, stocks, crypto, and all that other stuff. And he kind of he's sounding an alarm for at least what to expect in the near future, in the next couple of years. So I'm gonna tie that video in. It's a little under half an hour with this video, and I'm not doing it to depress you guys. I'm not doing it to try and bring you down in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to do it more as like in the same way that news channels have weather reports, so you know what to expect. Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't go on that long 4-hour drive in the middle of a hurricane or a tornado as it's approaching. Maybe I'll reschedule the trip, or maybe I'll take another route. That is the reason that I am posting this. I want to solely show you what is coming in the future. That, again, I can't express it as well as this guy can, but I think what he shares is extremely important, and I just want you guys to be aware of what's going on so that you can live your best life, okay? So take some time, take a few deep breaths, and observe this from a place of grounding.
So, so what I want to talk to you about today is the economic situation that is unfolding around the world. And I'm not going to go into depth about it, but mostly what I'm going to do is direct your attention to some information that I'm going to post on my profile page on Facebook. And I will probably post it elsewhere. And I will probably write an article for my own website about this information. But it's so timely and important that I thought I would just jump on here and give a heads up to anyone who has the good fortune to experience this short video. So I don't want to make this long, so I'll get right to the point. Some of you may not realize that I spend 2 or 3 hours a day watching and listening to podcasts and interviews about investment and financial information. This is partly how I prepare for the future and finance my way of life. Now that, of course, doesn't mean I'm sitting glued to my computer watching experts on YouTube, which is the main place that I find them. But I find, whether I'm driving the car or walking the dog or doing something around the house, I can listen to them. Sometimes I listen to them at 1.5 or double speed so that I can get through more. And I have my favorite shows and favorite experts I found my way through to over the years. Anyway, for several months now, I've been looking for one video, one podcast, one interview that I could share with everybody that encapsulates what is going on in the world economically and what is about to happen with the economic collapse, which is already underway. And so I've been looking for this, and I just found it yesterday. and I'm going to be posting it. In fact, I just posted it on Facebook, and I'll tell you more about it in a sec. It's actually 2 interviews with the same guy, Francis Hunt, who's a South African trader and very interesting fellow. Now, the reason it took me so long to find something that I wanted to share of this nature was that there are many financial analysts and investment advisors who understand how the US Fed works, how money is brought into creation by the issuance of debt and all that kind of thing, and they can give you a very good explanation from a conventional point of view of what's happening. But what I find more often than not is they'll say things that reveal to me that they're not aware of the larger picture of what's going on with the globalist plan. And so they'll say things like, oh, the US Fed is making a terrible mistake. Oh, the US Fed is incompetent. Oh, Janet Yellen doesn't know what she's doing, and all this kind of thing. They'll say that about the US Federal Reserve, or they'll say it about other central banks in general. And that's a clue to me that while they may understand how these things work, they don't understand the larger picture, okay? So what I was excited with this interview that I'm sharing with you all is, sorry, I'm just going to plug in my power here so I don't run out of battery while I'm talking here. And again, this isn't going to be long, okay? What I was happy to hear was that this is a guy who understands the total situation, and he understands that what the U.S. Federal Reserve is doing, and let's not forget the Fed is a private banking cartel, and no one even understands fully who owns it. It's not a public or government institution, despite the name, but you probably know that already. He understands, this Francis Hunt, South African investment person, he understands that this is deliberate statecraft, that what the Fed has done over the past few years or decades, well, especially the past few years, it has hyperinflated the economy so that everything now is in a bubble. We're in a real estate bubble, which is starting to crash, burst. We're in a stock market bubble, which is starting to crash. Crypto was in a bubble, it is crashing. Everything's been in a bubble. And so it's been very difficult for investors like myself to know what to do. And anyway, what the gist of what Francis Hunt says and has identified is that ultimately the goal is to inflate the economy and deliberately crash it, and to destroy the currencies of the nations, the dominant currencies of the world, the US dollar, the British pound, and the Japanese yen. Now the pound and the yen are starting to crash, and there was a flash crash of the British pound just yesterday. There is extreme instability in the debt market. If you want to learn more about that, I suggest you check out videos from Gregory Mannarino on his channel on YouTube. He talks about that a lot. He's one of the few other people that gets what's going on. Anyway, Francis Hunt appeared in, I think it was July, and also a couple of weeks ago on an Australian YouTube channel about investment called Small Caps, as in small cap stocks. And the host of that show is a woman who's very articulate and very good at getting this guy to stay on point. He's kind of a genius type of person, and he speaks a mile a minute, and you're going to have to lean in to understand what he's saying. I have listened to both of these interviews twice to fully grok what he's saying. And it's also, I wanted to mention that it's also the end of the Shemitah year in the Jewish calendar. And it's not just any Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is a 7-year cycle, but this is the end of 7 Shemitah years. So it's the end of a 49-year cycle, and in the Jewish calendar, the 7 Shemitah years are followed by a 50th final year called the Jubilee year. And you can look that up on Wikipedia and elsewhere. Be careful, because some of these things are not explained properly. But the Jubilee is a year of debt forgiveness. And historically, that's what happened, is that was the year when you would forgive all your debts. And you would actually forgive debts every 7 years. But we have moved away from that system long ago. So as I've said in other information I've shared in recordings like this, we're at the end of a fourth turning, an 80 to 100 year 4-generation cycle, when the Ponzi scheme known as fiat currency, in other words, currency not backed up by gold, and now it looks like the US dollar is not even going to be backed up by the petrodollar. For those of you who don't know, the petrodollar just means that this was negotiated by Henry Kissinger back in the 70s. When the US went off the gold standard, Kissinger negotiated with the King of Saudi Arabia that all oil sales would be settled in US dollars, which effectively made the US dollar into the world reserve currency. And it took the place of what had been the previous one, which was the British pound. So that whole system is coming to an end. And what the globalists are doing, people like Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and his concept of the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, they've timed the Great Reset to coincide with this economic, sort of the system running out of gas, so to speak, that they knew was coming anyway. Now, normally what would happen is you'd have a Jubilee year, you'd have debt forgiveness, and then you would start the whole system over again, backing the currency with gold. Now, the BRICS nations are expanding, and they're creating a competing system that's going to be backed by a basket of different goods, including gold, but also other commodities. And that's basically, the globalists are pivoting the world to an Asian-based system, and they're moving the prosperity and the empire away from the U.S. So this is going to be the death of the U.S. empire, and it's going to be the birth of an entirely new social order that they used to call the New World Order, and now they call it global governance, which I guess they think that sells better. Klaus Schwab calls it stakeholder capitalism. And I'm halfway through Alex Jones' very good book on the Great Reset and the War for the World, as it's entitled, and he does a good job of explaining this as well. Whatever you think of Alex Jones, he does a good job on this book. So there's a new economic order coming, and as you'll see when you listen to these two back-to-back interviews, this is not something that's just going to play out over a whole bunch of years. I mean, of course, the fulfillment of the new plan will take quite a few years, but the system, when it breaks, which it's doing now, it's going to fall apart extremely quickly, and everybody needs to prepare for this. And this is, I've been saying this for 2.5 years, ever since the biological narrative got started out of Wuhan, but now it's really happening. And I will admit that I was about a year early in making my own preparations. I would have done better if my wife and I had held on to our house for one more year and things like that. You know, it's very hard to time the absolute top or bottom, but we got out, and we're mostly in precious metals now, and which I was pleased to hear is one of the main things that Francis Hunt advocates. Now, one of the little tips I'm going to give you is that in order to get through what's coming, we need to stop thinking in fiat currency terms. Everyone, when we talk, and I do this too, when we think about the price of Bitcoin or the price of gold, or the price of silver, which are going to do, especially silver, is going to do a huge moonshot sometime in the coming months or the next year or so. We tend to always think of it in fiat terms, like, you know, how much is gold, an ounce of gold worth in fiat currency terms. We have got to get out of that habit, because it's a fact that gold and silver and crypto are going to go down in price, but they are not necessarily going to go down in value. So distinguish between price and value, because I can tell you that a year or two from now, you won't be saying, oh, gold is worth $2,000 an ounce or whatever it's worth. What you'll be saying is, how much is that house worth in gold? How much silver do I need to buy that car? How much Bitcoin, and I'm not as committed to Bitcoin as I used to be, and I've reduced my position almost completely now, but I plan to have a small position in it in case, as an insurance policy, in case Francis Hunt is wrong about this. I could take up a lot of your time going over what Francis Hunt says, and I'd rather not do that, because he does a better job than I ever could explaining how this all works. But there is one thing I want you to understand that I have just recently come to understand about the instability in the debt markets, which is the most important thing to pay attention to. This is where we're going to have runs on banks. We're going to have bank failures. My wife and I are getting all of our money out of the bank. The banks are starting to limit how much money you can take out. There's all kinds of restrictions coming, and now we have the U.S. government and other governments slowly announcing the shift to central bank digital currency, which is programmable digital currency. And they're already saying you will have to have a digital ID in order to access that money. And we know that there'll be a lot of things that are required for the digital ID, including that you'll be penalized under the social credit system if your views are offside of what the government wants you to think and express, and they'll want you to be up to date on all of your shots and things like this. So the potential for coercion is extraordinary here. And at this point, as much as I think it's the hill we die on, I would, as a betting man, I would say the odds are looking favorable that the CBDC is going to be introduced in almost every country. And so a lot of us are going to have to create a parallel system. And I'm spending most of my time working with other people to conceptualize what that society is going to look like, how we're going to live in off-grid homes, in settlements, and what kind of currencies are we going to create of our own. Are we going to transact in gold or silver or Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, privacy coins like Monero and Darrow and Pirate Chain? Or are we going to have local self-issued currencies, or all of the above, which I think it'll be a mashup of all of them, actually. But the thing to understand is this, and this, you've got to start, everyone needs to start researching and understanding currency collapse. And a book that I have ordered, and a good friend of mine is reading it, it's called When Money Dies. When Money Dies. And it goes into the history of currency collapse, and it looks closely at the Weimar Republic and so on. And it's very important to understand this, because people in Germany, in the Weimar Republic, after the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, they didn't get into financial trouble right away. It took a few years. They actually had a very seemingly prosperous time when, just like now, house prices were going up, the stock market was going up, everybody felt prosperous. They would look at the German mark and say, well, I don't think there's anything to worry about with the Deutschmark. It was all fake, because it was all being propped up by money printing, just as we are seeing today. And when the bottom fell out, it was almost overnight, and the Deutschmark went to being worth a millionth of of its former value. And people, and not just the currency became worthless, but in times of desperation, food becomes a currency too. And there's stories of people buying an entire apartment building for 3 potatoes and stuff like that. And that will come. It'll come to other countries. It'll come to Europe before it comes here. The oligarchs are coordinating the destruction of the euro and the eurozone, and the Europeans are going to be in for a very difficult winter. I don't think the full famine and everything is going to hit until 2024, but the supply chains have been broken, and the supplies of fertilizer and so on for crops have been starved. And as the Mike Adams, the health ranger, has pointed out, there's some bottlenecks occurring with diesel fuel additives and also the oil that is diesel engines run on. And if that locks up, the entire transportation distribution system for everything will lock up. We're talking about the potential here for a civilization level of collapse, and this is what the globalists actually want, because the more they can wipe out the middle class and put the working class into servitude, the more they can force them to accept the new system, which will be an AI-controlled totalitarian system known as a technocracy. One other detail about why these currency collapses are important and why they affect us. Just imagine, I'll just make up an example, and by the way, the US dollar is doing very well, but as one person said, the US dollar is the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse, because the US dollar is also crashing, but it's crashing more slowly than the other currencies. And here's why. Let's say you're a company in the United States and you sell product. Well, you don't even have to be in the States. Let's just say you're somebody who lives in another country. Most transactions and most debts are settled in US dollars around the world. So if I live in, I don't know, I'll just pick a country, Thailand. Let's say I'm in the Thai baht, and I purchased something for $10,000 for my company, and so I owe $10,000 that I paid for in US dollars. And now that I have to start paying that debt, but my currency, my Thai baht, has collapsed, and let's say it's only worth a tenth of what it used to be. I might be exaggerating, but I'm just making the point. Now I've got to pay back that $10,000 US, but my currency is only worth a tenth, so now it's going to cost me 10 times to repay that debt. So you can see where this is going to lead to defaults around the world, and those defaults ultimately are going to show up in the U.S. because the dollars, to simplify a bit, the U.S. dollars that used to be projected around the world by the U.S. empire with the petrodollar that I mentioned earlier, they're all coming home as it ceases to be the world reserve currency. And so for a while, Americans are going to have to think, oh, the dollar's strong, I'll just invest in US dollars. And recently, in the past few months, that's been a good idea. But the US dollar will eventually collapse as well. And when that happens, some of the experts that I listen to are saying, we will be in for a world, not just a recession, a global depression that will be the biggest depression since the Roman Empire, and it will be dwarf the 1930s depression in the States and other countries. So people need to prepare, and I don't want to take away the punchline from Francis Hunt's talk, but just so I can whet your appetite a bit. He has his own online community where they discuss the fact that you need to load up on as much gold and silver as you can, and also if wherever possible, if you can move into an off-grid home or live in a settlement, an intentional community of like-minded people to render mutual support, which is what Vanessa and I are in the process of investigating and will eventually do. So everybody has a lot of preparation to make, but I'm not saying all this to depress you, because these are also exciting times. It's an exciting time to be alive. It's interesting that we all incarnated at this time, and we're going to be living through this it will be a great reset associated with the end of the 50-year, 49-year Jewish calendar and the Jubilee, and also the end of the fourth turning since the creature from Jekyll Island created the U.S. Fed. And so there you go. That's really what I wanted to say. For those of you who find this to be worthwhile, I'll just mention, and then I'll sign off, that I will continue to post the very best economic articles and videos that I find. And so if you check in with, Facebook doesn't notify you always when I post something, obviously. So you might want to make a point of checking my profile page on Facebook once a week. Maybe check my website, hypnosis.co, once a month for updates. I will put a link to my website under this video. Don't expect it to be there the minute I sign off on this video because I'm driving, but sometime later this afternoon I'll put some more Easter eggs and Christmas presents for you all under that Francis Hunt double interview. So I hope you found this helpful. Those of us who are in the resistance, we need to share this kind of information and help one another in these challenging times. And again, please do not make the mistake that I think a lot of people make. They consume something that I share, and that's the end of it. You must share this information, not just this video, but the articles and video links that I post, because the more we can make them go exponential and viral, the more people whose lives we will help. And because we need to, as I like to say, and in fact one of my most recent articles for Druthers gets into this, we can't just react again to the globalists and share information about what their latest horrendous move is, because what we resist persists. We need to start manifesting what we want, because God knows the other side does that, and they use sigil magic and rituals and all kinds of crazy stuff to bring about the world they want. And the evidence that of their commitment is how far they've gotten. I just want to say one more thing, and then this video is already longer than I wanted it to be. It's a lot of people think, oh, we have to work to prevent the globalists from taking over the world economy. I'm sorry, folks, that's not a correct way of explaining it. The globalists already have taken over. You don't get 195 plus countries all singing from exactly the same song sheet at the behest of the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum and people like Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci. You don't get that unless you've already taken over. Have they taken over completely? No, I won't go so far as to say that. But they have largely taken over. We are fighting now to get our world back. And what we don't want to do is just go back to the way it was. Let's take advantage of this and move forward and create the world that we want, which I would say should be a decentralized world with a lot of local governance, not global governance. Just take everything the globalists say and do the opposite. So where they want global governance, we want local governance. Where they want big corporations colluding with big government, which was Mussolini's definition of fascism, we want small local self-governance, and we want small local production and not big companies, blah, blah, blah. So you get the point. Thank you very much, everybody, for your kind attention. As I love to say, namaste in Lakesh, and take care of yourselves until we speak again.